That night, the sky seemed to wear a deep black velvet cloak, so still that the chirping of insects by the fence and the faint ticking of the clock could be heard with absolute clarity. James drove toward his mother's house, the familiar road somehow feeling longer than usual. The dim yellow streetlights cast a patchy glow across the rain-slick pavement, reflections gliding over the windshield, as if a heavy fog had settled over his mind. The small house at the end of the road came into view, warm yellow light spilling from the familiar window. But instead of the usual sense of peace, tonight that light stirred a vague unease in him. He stopped the car, took a deep breath, and tried to shake off the weight pressing against his chest before opening the door to step inside. His mother was sitting in the kitchen, her back slightly hunched, a pot of tea long gone cold before her. The yellow light painted her face with a shade of melancholy that could not be hidden. At the sound of the door opening, she looked up, her weary eyes holding on to a piece of news for far too long, waiting for the moment she had no choice but to share it. She stayed silent for a beat, inhaled deeply, as if choosing each word carefully. "Your father called me this morning." That sentence opened the door to a flood of grim news. Her voice grew quieter, sometimes breaking with a sigh. The call had come at dawn, when the fog was still clinging to the path, and his father's voice on the other end was hoarse, fragmented from sleepless nights. He didn't mince words, things were worse than any report suggested. The two companies in Cambodia, once his pride and life's work, were now like giant machines running out of breath, their gears grinding down to a halt. In just 1 week, contracts had been cancelled in waves, longtime partners quietly withdrew, suppliers stopped deliveries without warning, workers surrounded the headquarters demanding back pay. The cash reserves were nearly depleted, and part of the bank accounts had been frozen due to unresolved legal disputes. His mother said his father didn't complain or lament, but the pauses between his words were weighed down by an unspoken despair. She had tried to persuade him. "Why don't you let it go and come back to Vietnam with me and our son? What could be more important than family?" But on the other end, his father's voice dropped, firm to the point of making her throat tighten. "This is my life's work. I can't abandon it." Hearing this, James' hand instinctively tightened around the teacup, though the heat was not enough to chase away the cold spreading from his chest. His knuckles turned white with tension. He understood his father, understood the resilience, the stubbornness, and the pride of a man who had spent half his life building a dream. He also knew that if he stepped into this battle, it would come at a cost, not only his own peace, but also the precious time beside the woman he loved more than himself. His mother looked straight into his eyes, her frail hand resting lightly on his shoulder, her voice soft as a breeze yet resonating deep within him. "Before you go, you should visit Diep. She's building the new farm based on your design. Spend an evening with her, who knows when you'll have the chance again." James didn't answer immediately. In that moment, he realized he was standing between two paths. One was duty to his father and his father's lifetime of work, the other was love and the quiet days by Diep's side. Both were so important that whichever he chose, it would mean a sacrifice. That evening, as dusk withdrew, the sky sank into the deep hue of violet silk. James slowed the car as the village road emerged, flanked on both sides by rice fields stretching to the horizon. The cool breeze carried the scent of damp earth and tender young rice through the cracked window, wrapping around his thoughts, making his chest tighten with longing. Each turn of the wheels brought him closer to the hardest thing he would have to say. The car stopped in front of the familiar wooden gate. The porch light spilled a warm ring of gold, and within that glow, Diep's figure came into focus, small yet brimming with vitality. She held a bag of chicken feed, a few loose strands of hair drifting lightly across her cheek. "Sorry. I was afraid the chickens would be hungry." She smiled, her eyes sparkling like a sky full of stars, unaware that this would be their last night together before he left. In the small kitchen, the dinner James had prepared was already set, steaming bowls of hot white rice, a plate of stir-fried greens fragrant with garlic, and golden braised pork glistening in coconut juice. The aroma mingled with the warmth of the oil lamp in the corner, making the space feel unusually tender. But within that warmth was a quiet shadow, like gray clouds slowly veiling part of the sky. They began eating as usual, yet James was different, serving Diep, ladling soup into her bowl, then lowering his gaze, avoiding hers. Inside, words crowded his mind only to dissolve before reaching his lips. If he spoke now, would that smile vanish? But if he stayed silent and left the next morning without saying anything, he would regret it for the rest of his life. When Diep set her chopsticks down, tilting her head toward him, her voice was as light as a breeze yet touched the unease he was trying to hide. "You're not yourself today, what's the matter?" James looked up at her, then down again. His breathing slowed. He took a deep breath, fingers interlaced under the table to steady a faint tremor. The seconds of silence stretched as long as an hour. Finally, he spoke, each word heavy as lead. "Tomorrow I have to go to Cambodia. My father's company is on the brink. I can't not go. And I don't know when I'll be back." The air sank into stillness. Firelight flickered in Diep's eyes, making the glimmer there seem to hold an entire sky of longing. She didn't ask why or how long, only reached out to take his hand. The warmth of her palm spread to him, easing a fraction of the weight in his chest. "Go. I'll be here, waiting for you, no matter how long." James swallowed the vague fear that time would erode her memory and steal her away. But Diep smiled, her gaze unwavering. "A month, a year, or many years. I'll still be here." That dinner lasted longer than usual. They spoke of simple things, the newly planted vegetable rows, the chicks just hatched, the farm design he wanted to complete when he returned. At times they laughed over small memories, as if using laughter to push away the shadow of farewell hanging over them. That night, James stayed over. The small room smelled faintly of wood, with a trace of jasmine drifting from the window. Lying beside each other, Diep shifted closer, wrapping her arms around him from behind. The embrace was neither hurried nor fragile, but firm, holding on to each heartbeat. Her hair brushed against his neck, its familiar scent melting every guard he had. James turned to face her, meeting her eyes in the darkness. They were silent for a long time, listening only to the rhythm of their hearts. Then he whispered, "Tears are for the one you love. Don't cry in front of those who want to hurt you. And save your most beautiful smile, so that when I return, I'll be the first to see it." Diep smiled faintly, but her arms tightened around him, her cheek pressed to his chest as if to memorize the sound of his heartbeat. Outside, the wind sighed through the bamboo, the insects chirped, a chorus keeping the night from slipping away too quickly. The next morning, the first light slipped through the door, bathing Diep's face in a soft glow. James opened his eyes to see her still asleep, her small hand clasping his as though afraid letting go would make him vanish. He leaned down, kissed her forehead, and murmured, "I'll come back, Diep. I promise." At the gate, the early air was crisp, the scent of dew mingling with earth. Diep stood there, her eyes steady on him, her voice firm though her hands trembled. "If you leave early, you'll come back early." James pulled her into a tight embrace, as if to etch every breath and heartbeat into his memory. On the road to the airport, his phone buzzed. A message from her, "I will always wait." He read it again and again, letting those words become the lighthouse guiding him through the uncertain seas ahead. The first days in Cambodia passed like an unending storm. James barely knew the meaning of sleep, leaving a boardroom meeting only to rush straight into negotiations with suppliers, then diving into late-night calls with clients on the verge of canceling contracts. Spreadsheets stretched endlessly across his laptop screen like a cold, unforgiving maze, each glaring red number stabbing deeper into his chest. Every financial report he opened piled on another layer of pressure, like relentless waves crashing down, denying him even a single long breath. Yet in the middle of that chaotic cycle, all it took was a moment of stillness for Diep's image to flood back to him. The soft fall of her black hair over her shoulders, the depth in her eyes that held a light he couldn't find anywhere else, and the gentle voice that reassured him, "Go, I'll wait," all became the only medicine keeping him from being swept away. Some nights, when Phnom Penh had long fallen asleep, James would sit motionless by the hotel window. Street lamps cast pools of gold on the empty roads, while the occasional motorbike slid past, leaving a brief trail of light in the darkness. He would stare down, and his mind would drift hundreds of kilometers away, to a small home scented with sun-dried straw, where the sound of roosters mixed with the whisper of rural winds. In his memory, he could almost hear her laughter from the porch, and his heart would ache. The distance had never felt so long, so heavy. But work gave him no room for weakness. The internal investigation gradually revealed shadowy connections, contracts cancelled at the last moment, shipments mysteriously held at port, rumors of bankruptcy spreading like wildfire. Every thread led back to the same name, John, the family's sworn enemy, a man who had vowed to settle old scores no matter how many years passed. Then one night, his phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. It was short, but cold as a blade. "If the market can't bring him down, the girl will." James's chest tightened instantly. He knew without a doubt that the girl meant Diep. Every instinct told him to drop everything and go back to protect her, but his duty to his father, and the family legacy, kept him bound to this battleground. If he walked away now, he would return empty-handed, and John would be free to target her without distraction. From that night on, James's fight was no longer just about saving the company, it was about blocking every threat that could reach the woman he loved. He quietly hired security in Vietnam to watch over Diep's farm, tracking every movement from afar. Every day, he sent her a message, even if it was just a few words, "Are you all right?" or "I'm still fighting." Sometimes, in the middle of a tense meeting, his phone would buzz. A message from her. "It poured today, I couldn't get the rice in on time, but I'm fine. Don't worry." Just a few words, yet they were enough to pull him back from the edge of exhaustion, enough for him to take a deep breath, square his shoulders, and carry on. The battle with John was more than reclaiming contracts or holding on to clients. It was a shadow war, stripping away his rival's influence and dismantling his network piece by piece. Every small victory, whether it was saving a client, reclaiming a shipment, or proving a rumor false, was a step closer to the day he could return to her. James knew that when the storm finally passed, he would come back, not just to keep his promise, but to hold Diep in his arms and feel her warmth as if the distance had never existed. And he vowed to himself that when that day came, he would never leave her again. Back in the countryside, in the first days without James, Diep kept herself busy with the new farm. In the mornings, the sound of roosters echoed across the yard, blending with the chatter of birds in the bamboo tops. The first sunlight filtered through the beetle palm leaves, scattering golden speckles on the ground like delicate gold leaf. She carried a bucket of feed to the chicken coop, scattering the grains while smiling to herself at the memory of James sitting at the wooden table on the porch, head bent over a design sketch. He had explained every detail with care, frowning each time she teasingly said his drawing looked bad. By noon, the sun beat down on the red dirt road outside the garden, radiating heat, but Diep still went out to plant another row of vegetables. Her hands were smeared with soil, sweat beading on her forehead, yet in her mind she saw James crouching beside her, helping her pull weeds, brushing sweat from his brow with the back of his hand before giving her that warm smile. Now and then, a breeze swept through the bamboo, the rustling leaves sounding like someone softly calling her name. She would look up, startled, half convinced she saw his figure standing at the end of the row, watching her with gentle eyes. As the afternoon faded, sunlight stretched long shadows across the yard. Diep swept away dry leaves and watered the new vegetable rows. The scent of damp earth mingled with the freshness of young leaves, reminding her of the earthy fragrance James used to say was the smell of peace. At night, the little kitchen felt far too quiet. Dinner for one was marked only by the lonely clink of spoon against bowl. Some evenings, she cooked James's favorite dish, sour snakehead fish soup with aromatic herbs, only to let it go cold, because there was no one there to take the first bite. After eating, she would sit by the window, the glow from a neighbor's house casting light in the distance, imagining that James too was somewhere, under another lamp, perhaps thinking of her. On sleepless nights, Diep sat on the porch, wrapped in the jacket James had left behind. His familiar scent still lingered in the fabric, stinging her eyes. She remembered his parting words clearly, "Tears are for the one you love. Don't cry in front of those who wish to hurt you." She bit her lip hard, not letting a single tear fall, though her heart still ached like it was being squeezed in someone's fist. Sometimes, her phone would buzz, a message from him. "Are you okay?" She would reply simply, "I'm fine. Don't worry." But after putting the phone down, she would sit staring at the screen, wishing for another message, a longer one, telling her what he had eaten, if he'd gotten enough sleep, and whether he missed her. In her weakest moments, Diep would walk out to the farm, laying her hand on each wooden post and thatched roof panel of the project taking shape, as if holding on to the shared fragments of their dream. Sometimes, she pressed her cheek to the cool wood, eyes closed, imagining the day James would come back, walk in beside her, and laugh out loud because their dream had become real. She told herself, if he's fighting, then I must stay strong too. When he comes back, everything will be ready, the farm and our promise. A few days later, when the afternoon sun had turned golden on the tiled roof, the familiar sound of a motorbike echoed from the end of the village road. Diep looked up from the basket of vegetables she was picking and saw James's mother slowly making her way in. She wore a light ash-gray jacket, and in the basket on her bike were a bag of fruit and several bundles of fresh vegetables. "I'm bothering you again," she said with a gentle smile, her voice as soft as the spring breeze. "What are you saying? I'm more than happy to see you." Diep quickly stood up and ran over to take the basket. In the kitchen, the scent of simmering sour snakehead fish soup mingled with the delicate fragrance of lime leaves. James's mother sat down on the bamboo chair, her eyes wandering around the room before stopping at a neatly hung shirt of James's on the wall hook. "You still keep his shirt here?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with a slight catch. "Yes, every night I still take it out and fold it, just like when he was still home." Diep lowered her head, her hands nervously twisting together. The older woman smiled and gently placed a hand on Diep's shoulder. "My dear, don't let longing turn into a burden. Let it be your strength. I believe he'll come back soon, stronger, so he won't let your waiting be in vain." Diep looked up at her, eyes glistening. "Do you really believe that?" "I don't just believe, I'm certain. From the time he was little until now, James has never given up on anything that mattered to him. And you are what matters most," she said firmly, then took a jar of homemade mango jam from the basket. "I made mango jam, his favorite. When he comes back, the two of you can enjoy it together." The two of them sat together on the porch steps, chatting while listening to the wind play through the bamboo grove. When it was time to leave, Diep walked her to the gate, watching her figure grow smaller down the road. In her heart, those words of encouragement were like a small flame, warming a heart tightened by longing. That night, Diep lay her head on the pillow James once used and whispered softly into the emptiness. My love. I'll wait for you.
Hello, xin chào tất cả mọi người. Mình là chủ của kênh, cũng là người đã edit và tải lên YouTube những câu chuyện mà hôm nay mọi người xem. Mình cũng rất vui là nếu như mọi người có thể xem được tới đoạn cuối cùng, là 1 phút cuối mình chia sẻ, thì mình cũng rất may mắn khi được mọi người đón xem video của mình. Mình hy vọng rằng trong những video tiếp theo vẫn có thể gặp lại mọi người. Và mình hy vọng rằng video của mình có một phần nào đó có thể mang lại chút ý nghĩa và góp phần làm cho cuộc sống của mọi người trở nên vui vẻ hơn và ý nghĩa hơn. Nếu như mà mọi người yêu quý kênh của mình cũng như là yêu quý các nhân vật thì hãy đăng ký kênh, sau đó bật chuông thông báo lên để không bỏ lỡ bất kỳ video nào mọi người nhé. Và hãy thể hiện tình cảm với video và các nhân vật bằng cách là ấn like hoặc là để lại tim trong phần bình luận. Và nếu như mà mọi người muốn lan tỏa thông điệp này đến những người khác thì hãy chia sẻ video đến cho mọi người bạn của mình đều có thể xem được. Mình rất hy vọng là có thể gặp lại mọi người trong những video tiếp theo.